In the recent 12-day war, we saw the most advanced air defense system in the world go up against a much cheaper and less advanced ballistic missile force. And the outcome was not what most people expected. Many ballistic missiles penetrated through the American and Israeli defenses and caused significant damage despite their limited accuracy. It is estimated that the Israelis used 30 to 40% of their Arrow 3 missiles, and the US used 15% of their worldwide THAAD stockpile and even used the most advanced SM-3 missiles based on destroyers in the Mediterranean. This represents years of production and billions of dollars for only 12 days of combat. The depletion of missile defenses could even be the main reason that Israel decided to end the war so quickly. This really showed the fundamental problems of missile defense, but things only get more challenging when you try to intercept an intercontinental ballistic missile that's traveling at Mach 25. So first, let's start with the current defenses of the United States. We have the ground-based mid-course defense system, which is a system of radars and 44 interceptors staged in Alaska and California. There are also dozens of SM-3 missiles deployed in Europe and on naval ships. And they both work by identifying the missile with radar, then shooting a missile into space that deploys a kill vehicle that is guided with an infrared camera and thrusters for the final phase. And the truth is that both of these systems are pretty unreliable. So here are the most recent tests, and you can see that they have been mostly successful recently, but of course, these are not realistic scenarios. And if you want to really deep dive into these tests, I recommend watching this YouTube video here. First of all, the timing and trajectory of the missile is known in these tests beforehand, and the locations of the ground-based launchers and radars, or the destroyers, are ideally placed in the path of the missile's trajectory so they know when and where to launch. Second, Russian intercontinental ballistic missiles and American submarine-launched ballistic missiles use MIRVed rockets that will have several real warheads per missile. Also, since the warhead is in space, you can deploy chaff, flares, balloons, fake warheads, and jammers, and they will all stay in the vicinity of the warhead until it re-enters the atmosphere. The decoy and actual warheads will be kilometers apart, so the kill vehicle needs to decide which to navigate to when it is tens of kilometers away or even further. At that range, the real warheads and decoys will be low-resolution dots or blurs on the infrared camera. Then it will travel several kilometers in seconds and hit the target it selected much earlier in its trajectory. In the official tests, these countermeasures are limited to one decoy with known infrared and radar signatures so that they could demonstrate the guidance system. In a real attack, though, there will be more decoys that would be identical to the warhead in infrared, so the kill vehicle could not tell which was the real warhead. So in a real scenario, we wouldn't be able to stop a salvo of 5 or more missiles from Russia or China that will have all of those countermeasures with our current systems. They would simply be overwhelmed. And if we try to do it in the atmosphere with THAAD missiles, it would be even harder. Modern ICBMs will have MARVs, or maneuvering reentry vehicles, so they will change their course very quickly in the terminal stage. And shooting down a ballistic missile in the atmosphere requires the same conditions as shooting down a plane, where you need an advantage in energy so that you can maneuver and move faster than your target that you need to collide with. An ICBM will be going Mach 25 coming into the atmosphere, so it has tons of kinetic energy and has the potential energy from its altitude as well. So anything launched from the ground cannot maneuver or move as fast as the warhead. Now there is one caveat here for the Russian Amur system, which would be an interceptor that could work in the terminal phase, but it only does this by exploding a nuclear warhead as the ICBM is coming in. And so this would work well in some scenarios, but it only works for a small range and obviously has tons of downsides. So current ICBMs are already hypersonic missiles. The buzzword hypersonic usually refers to the new hypersonic glide vehicles that are used to make the missile go faster for longer within the atmosphere. But since the in-space interceptors we have already won't work, this is why hypersonic glide vehicles are a bit overhyped. So the only way to beat ICBMs in the coast and terminal phase will be thousands of interceptors to hit every single decoy and warhead in space, or thousands of super hypersonic terminal interceptors that don't even exist. And this brings us to the Golden Dome proposal, where they want to hit the missile while it is still within the first 3 or 4 minutes of the boost phase. Now this won't really work for ground-based interceptors because you need to launch your interceptor after you've already confirmed the threat of the ICBM. And you need to catch up to it from very far away before it gets to space within a couple minutes. So it would only work if your launcher is super close to their launcher, which it's not for Russia, and you launch just after the ICBM, and you know exactly where it's going. Otherwise, there are just no missiles that can accelerate faster than the ICBM missile for long enough, so it wouldn't work. So this is why they propose space-based interceptors to hit the missile while it's still in the boost phase. But with a basic understanding of orbital mechanics, you'll see that this is super impractical. And the first reason is that there's no air in space, so you need to use thrusters for all of the satellite's acceleration. And since you can only pull around 3 Gs with a rocket stage, this really limits the sphere of area that the satellite can navigate to within 3 to 4 minutes. I made a simulation of this with 100 satellites flying at 500 kilometers, and you can see that there is usually only a few satellites that will be in range that I highlight in yellow, where they can intercept the rocket within the first 4 minutes of flight with a 3G acceleration. This also assumes that the interceptor starts accelerating just as the missile launches. In reality, it would take a few minutes to identify the threat and authorize the interceptors to activate. Also, in this scenario, you would need a huge rocket stage to pull this off, up to 7 kilometers per second of delta V, which is 3 Gs for 4 minutes, and that would be much more massive than your kill vehicle and add tons of cost to the mission. So you could probably only fit 1 or 2 of these stages in kill vehicles on a single Falcon 9, so we were talking hundreds of launches for just this basic constellation. And the coverage is so low that you need 100 satellites just to shoot down 1 missile, assuming the system works perfectly. So 98% of your constellation would be useless when an ICBM salvo of 10 missiles is launched all at the same time, and it would end up failing. So you're actually much better off just having 100 ground-based interceptor missiles than having 100 satellites that could act as interceptors. Finally, the orbits of these interceptor satellites would decay over time, so you would need to send new ones out every 5 to 10 years. And of course, everything in space is hard, so this would be extremely expensive and it would run into all sorts of problems that would make it somewhat less reliable. Okay, finally, let's talk about lasers. So lasers are really cool, but the first problem is that they don't work in bad weather. So if there's any rain or clouds or fog or dust, like we saw in the Iran-Israel war, then every wavelength of laser light will be attenuated and scattered. Also, lasers are electromagnetic radiation, so the irradiance or intensity falls off with the square of the distance. So even the 100 kilowatt laser systems only have a range of a few kilometers. And these only work on slow-moving drones, rockets, and cruise missiles because it needs to track them perfectly and have the beam on them for a while for it to catch fire. So for a nuke that is coming in at Mach 10 and it is a tiny warhead and it explodes a kilometer above a city, a laser will do nothing to stop it. Okay, so my main conclusion is that if you actually want to have a working system to stop a real ICBM attack, you're going to end up needing thousands of the mid-course interceptors, and you're just going to need to hit every single thing that you see on radar that's coming towards your country. The problem is the offense is always going to have an advantage, and it's always going to be cheaper for Russia to just build more ICBMs and more warheads and more decoys than it is for us to produce kill vehicles. Okay, so there's always an economic advantage for the attacker. And so my real conclusion is that we should basically accept defeat when it comes to defending ICBMs, and we should probably just keep some sort of ICBM force as a deterrent, and then of course just try to do arms controls agreements, and maybe eventually nobody will have any ICBMs and we can all be friends. Anyways, thanks so much for watching, and make sure to let me know if you have any opinions or disagreements down in the comment section below. And with that being said, make sure to like, subscribe, and share with your friends, and have a great day.